Hello out there, comic book lovers. This is Comic Ed, and I have a list for you all today. Today, we're going to talk about some key issues that you can find at your local stores. The thing about these key issues, though, is that they're not expensive key issues. They're not issues that you're going to see related to movies per se or speculation per se. Basically, they're just off the beaten path keys, and I selected them because they're characters that I like, there's stories that I like, there's art that I like. But let's walk through a couple of them. Hopefully, maybe you have some of these in your collection, or you can find them and add them to your collection if you're interested. But I'm going to walk through them, and the first that I'm going to give you is Action Comics 645. This is the first appearance of Maxima. Now, if you don't know anything about Maxima, she is an alien who searches throughout the galaxy looking for mates. She comes to Earth and discovers Superman, who she decides would be a perfect mate, and so she becomes obsessed with him. Now, you've seen Maxima in a lot of the DC comics, particularly with Superman. This is an amazing character. She's super strong. She can fly. A lot of the powers that you see with Superman, but she also has some psychic abilities as well. So this is a very strong female character that DC has. They could potentially use her on down the line. And again, just a great character that I think DC is not using appropriately and could bring into some of their storylines coming up. You never know. But right now, this is a cheap book. You can find it in dollar bins and a pretty cool character to add to your collection. Oh my gosh, these are so fun. The Superman Flash races. This is The Adventures of Superman 463, and this is the fifth time that Superman and Flash have raced each other throughout the years. The interesting part about this one is this is the first time that he's ever raced Wally West. So again, a great book, one of those early 90s books. You can find these relatively cheap. A key book because it's a Superman Flash race. So I really like that one. Here's one with a character that I've always liked since I was a kid. You've never really seen a whole lot with this character. There's been hype, there's been talk about potentially seeing this character come out in movies or in television, but that kind of comes and goes. But this is All-Star Squadron number 47, and it's the origin of Dr. Fate. So a really neat book to have if you're interested in that character. Tells you a lot about how his mystical journey unraveled. Another neat thing about this, if you're not familiar with the All-Star Squadron book from the 80s, is these are some early artwork in the DC Universe by Todd McFarlane. So a neat book. You can find this sometimes in some back issues for pretty cheap. If you can find this one and add to your collection, I would recommend it. Okay, bear with me here on this one. This is Alpha Flight number 40. Now, the importance of this book, why it's a key, is it's the marriage of Namor and Marina. Marina first appeared in Alpha Flight number 1, and this is, of course, the issue where they get married. It also has the 25th anniversary border, which is really cool. Now, the neat thing about this, there's a lot of rumors, and I'm going to talk about another book here in a moment with Namor. There's a lot of rumors of Namor potentially joining the Marvel Universe, cinematic universe, that is. Is he going to be in Black Panther 2? Is he going to eventually show up? Who knows? There's contract issues and so on and so forth. Now, the neat thing is if he does show up, and he shows up as the prince or the king of Atlantis, he's probably going to have his wife with him. And so her first appearance is a great one, but this is one that really flies under the radar where they get married and she becomes the queen of Atlantis. So, one to look for. Really cheap. I think I found this one for $1. Sticking with the marriage and couples theme, here's Amazing Spider-Man 290. And this is the proposal of Peter Parker to Mary Jane Watson. It ends in a cliffhanger. You find out 2 issues later her answer. Again, if you know a lot about the Marvel Universe or just the history of comics, you know what her answer is. But a neat book to have. There's so many great Amazing Spider-Man books that are keys and important. This one sort of flies under the radar, but one that's important as well in regards to that relationship. And also a really cool cover. And hard to find because of the white. This one is just purely my love. I love this cover. Amazing Spider-Man Annual 19. It's Mary Jane, donning the Spider-Man costume. And what I think is neat about this one is you've seen so many different versions of Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, different people taking up the mantle. This is one of the earliest incarnations of someone other than Peter Parker being Spider-Man, and it's Mary Jane. It's a really neat book. You can find these pretty cheap in the back issue bins. I would recommend getting it just because it's cool, it's fun, and I just love that cover. Here's one you can also find cheaply, and there's been some rumblings about this potentially becoming a television show or movie or something like that. It's American Flag #1. It's one of those early 1980s independence books. Another neat thing about this, the story, let me tell you a little bit about the story if you don't know about it. This is a former television TV star, who ends up fighting corruption in the future because things are really not good. It's got some humor, it's got some good art. It's by Howard Chaykin, who was the original Star Wars artist. If you ever get a chance to meet him at a convention, I would do that. He's an interesting person. But it's a neat book. You can find it pretty cheap, and again, you never know. Now, this one is a little bit of controversy. Some people hate it, some people love it. I absolutely love this run back in the early 90s. It's Armageddon 2001 from DC. This story revolves around a villain named Monarch. That 10 years in the future, 1991 to 2001, when this was going on, destroys the Marvel or the DC universe. Sorry, I was thinking Thanos there. Destroys the DC universe. And Wave Rider, who is a time traveler, comes back in time to figure out who this person is, because the rumor is that it's a superhero that turned. And so he goes, and this ran through the DC annuals for that summer. And so he goes and he visits all the superheroes, and he can touch them and see their future. So you see a lot of neat versions, a lot of cool versions of what the superheroes could be. Superman becomes the president. Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, gets a fan club and almost a cult-like following. And just different kinds of things that are really neat spins on the different characters of the DC universe. Now, where people kind of give this book a hard time, and I'm not going to ruin it in case you haven't read it and you want to pick these books up, you can get them really cheap, is the hero that was originally going to become Monarch. It leaked, and DC did not want that to ruin the story, and so at the last moment they changed it to another hero, which didn't make a lot of sense for the story and ended up being not, a very popular hero anyway. And so it kind of fell flat with that. But again, it's a fun book, just a fun run. But also as a key book, it's the first appearance of Monarch and the first appearance of Wave Rider. Now this one, with so many Avengers books, this one does fly under the radar. It's not necessarily a super off the page key, but it's Avengers 214. And all I'm going to say about it is it's the Avengers versus Ghost Rider. So enough said. These two are really out there, I think, but I love them. I love the covers. They're kind of offbeat. It's Batgirl 69 and 70. Now, if you've been keeping up with the Batman series that are going on now, I think it's Detective Comics actually, not Batman. Sorry, that are going on right now in DC, is that Nora Freeze has returned and she's helping Victor Freeze as a villain. This was one of her first reincarnations, and she comes back as Lazara. Again, you can find these in dollar bins, but if Nora Freeze eventually turns into a major Batman villain, which could happen, this is one of her early appearances of being reincarnated and taking on that role. Again, a Batman book that I would recommend you all having. It flies under the radar as a key. It's not one that's going to jump out as a major first appearance or major event going on, but it is a cool event in that it's the first time that Nightwing, Dick Grayson, meets Jason Todd as Robin #2. You can find these pretty cheap. They're not incredibly expensive, but a neat concept, because at the time that was a really unique dynamic and relationship that was going on with those two characters, and to have them meet for the first time and see how that pans out is really cool. This one is just nostalgia all the way. If you loved the old 60s Batman TV show, one of the coolest villains they had was King Tut, and Batman Confidential 26 is the first time that character appears in the DC universe. Again, good dollar bin fodder. Pick it up if you love that old show to see those characters come about. And the only question I have is, when is Egghead going to show up in the DC universe? Another Batman book is one of the Elseworlds books that came out in the 90s. And as you know a little bit, or maybe you don't know, Batman and Green Lantern never really got along. And part of that reason is Batman was jealous. He did not understand why Hal Jordan was chosen to be the Green Lantern of Earth. And he always felt that should have been something maybe he should have had a power bestowed upon him. And so that's part of the reason why they don't like each other. This book plays that out with Bruce Wayne does get the power ring and becomes the Green Lantern of Earth. So a neat Elseworld story. Those were always so fun back in the day. If you want to see a different variation of Green Lantern, I would highly recommend grabbing this book. You can get them pretty cheap. Another book, some people have talked about this book, and I'm going to show you the bagged and unbagged version, is Batman Shadow of the Bat that came out in the 90s when the Batman run was huge, and maybe that's why this book doesn't get a lot of love, is because there's so many of them, but it's two key important first appearances, and number one, that's Victor Zsasz, and then Jeremiah Arkham. They both appear, first appearances in this book. So if you can find these, grab them, put them in your collection. Those characters have already done some major work in the comic book series. You saw Victor Zsasz on the Gotham TV show. Again, really key characters. I highly recommend grabbing these because they're pretty cheap, because there's a lot of them. Oh my gosh, they're coming back. This movie's going to be coming out soon. Bill and Ted are returning. The neat thing about this book, again, is their first appearance in comic books. This was the DC adaptation of the film Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Now later on, Marvel developed an original series with these two, but this is their first appearance in comic book form. Again, is this book going to skyrocket because of the movie and the characters? Highly doubtful, but it's fun. If you love those characters, this is a neat book to add to your collection, and you can get them pretty cheap. All right, going back to our Black Panther friend and Namor and all the speculation going on there. If for some reason Namor ends up coming into Black Panther, and if he ends up in the Marvel Universe and he ends up, dealing with Wakanda and the war that they have, this book is an amazing cover. There's really nothing special about it other than the cover. I love the cover, and if this comes to fruition, we see these two going at it, what a great depiction of that, and you can find these pretty cheap. The last one I'm going to share you is again, it's a Batman book. And if you remember back in the 70s and 80s, both Batman and Superman had their own team-up books. So Batman's was The Brave and the Bold, which actually goes from the 60s, where he was teaming up with different DC characters. Superman had one called DC Presents. Now the interesting thing is they never teamed up in those two books, except for this issue. Now part of the reason why they probably didn't do that is because they were already teaming up in World's Finest. They were together in Justice League. They were the two biggest selling characters for DC. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of reason, I guess, to put them together anymore. But this was the only time, as far as I know, that Superman or Batman appeared in either of those runs together. Another great thing about this book is it's some wonderful, fantastic Jim Aparo art, who I think is one of the greatest Batman artists of all time. So there's a few that I want to share. I've got more to share. If you all like this, let me know. I'm enjoying making these. Just, hey, we're on quarantine. There's not a lot to do. We're digging through our comic books and reevaluating what we've got in our collections. And so I wanted to share a few of these. I've got more of these to share. I've also got some undervalued keys that are worth a little more and have a little more speculation value. I've also thought about what are some various characters and some runs and some important issues for some characters that maybe fly under the radar or aren't as prevalent as they need to be, I think. Some villains. So let me know what you think. I'd love to make some more, and I just love sharing comic books and talking about with everyone. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. Stay safe, and we will see you soon.